This lecture is yet another that I have the pleasure of recording at the UC San Diego Hospital. I mention this so that you will please forgive any background noises such as voices or code calls that are being broadcasted over the intercom. Clearly this is not the most ideal place to record a lecture, but it is necessary and it is what it is. I think the takeaway here is that art history can function effectively to distract and make somebody feel better when they are having to spend days sitting around in a hospital. Let's turn to happier subjects such as methodology. This is one of two lectures that I have recorded on methodology, and this lecture is focusing on formal analysis. Now, methodology, basically what this is referring to, look at the root word method, right? The method that an art historian will take in interpreting a work of art. So we don't just kind of come in and just look at something and give an interpretation. We do take a little bit more of a methodical approach, and formal analysis is a good one. Formal analysis is first of all, one of the earliest of the art historical methodologies, and many art historians say that this is the most simple of the methodologies, and I would agree with this. The value of formal analysis is it can give you an approximate interpretation. It's not going to give you a complete interpretation, but it can give you kind of an educated idea as to what it is you're looking at. With formal analysis, I think probably if you can, it's best to combine it with other methodologies. And that's what we will be doing in this class. In this class, the two methodologies we use most frequently are formal analysis and iconographical analysis. The latter is discussed in a different lecture. We'll combine these two together to formulate our interpretations. Before I continue, I do want to say that it is absolutely imperative that you make sure that you have watched both the formal elements lecture as well as the principle of design lecture before you watch this lecture. If you have not watched these lectures, you will not understand anything that I'm talking about. You do have to have this information. The only thing that's really required to conduct a formal analysis is a sort of working understanding of formal elements and design principles, which you will have after watching these lectures. Otherwise, that's all you need to know. You really don't have to do any research, although research is always helpful. It's not a requirement for formal analysis. Okay. The one thing I like about formal analysis is that actually the steps are laid out for us. This little roadmap, identify, describe, and interpret. This roadmap is helpful because it kind of forces you to engage with the image at a sort of a slower pace. You really can't rush art history. The reason why is because you do have to spend time looking. If you quickly sort of scan artwork, you might miss important details that are critical in the interpretation of the work. This sort of laying out of steps kind of forces you to enter in slow. And I myself am guilty of this, kind of going in too fast. We want to make sure that we go slow. The three steps of formal analysis are identify, describe, and interpret. And in this lecture, we're going to try to practice using these steps, looking at two different works of art. We're going to start with this fabulous stele that comes from the Akkadian period, Mesopotamia, the ancient Near East. Now, what we do first when we look at this is we're going to start out with the first step, which is identify. Okay. Now, with the identify step, all you do is look. Don't think, don't interpret, don't do anything but look. Okay. Now, what this means to look, to identify, is I want you to pull out your notes from your formal elements and your design principles lectures, okay? And see if you can find any of these elements, any of these principles in this sculpture. Now, I know the temptation probably is going to be to let this video keep running and hear me give you all the answers. That's probably not the best way to learn, and you're absolutely going to have to know this because you're going to have to demonstrate your formal analysis skills for papers. So I think that this is good to really kind of do what I suggest here in a way to learn how to look at and to interpret the art. Okay, so take out your notebook, go through your formal elements, go through your design principles, pause this video, and try to identify as much as you can. And that's all you have to do. For example, I'll give you one. Oh, I see implied line. That's all you have to do. So pause the video and then come back. Okay, so hopefully you've paused the video. You're back. Now, I did the same thing. I paused the video. I took a very close look. And here's what I came up with. Okay? See if this matches what you came up with. These are the things that I've noticed. Okay? So, this is my identification. These are the formal elements. These are the design principles. Okay? Now, down here I have material and I have size. Okay? This is not typically considered part of formal analysis, but I sometimes like to be a rebellious art historian, and I say why not? This will definitely help you with your interpretation, to think about the materials, to think about the scale. So let's put it in there, okay? The material is stone, doesn't matter which kind. The size, 6 feet 6 inches. Okay, so let's just keep that in our mind. All we're doing is identifying. Now let's move on to the describe, okay? This is where we think about, okay, we've identified some formal elements, design principles. Now we want to think about, why did the artist choose these elements and principles, okay? So first of all, implied line, right? How does implied line operate? Where do we see eye line? Where do we see gesture? Where do we see position of form? Where does it lead our eye? Now, I don't know about you, but my eye is led here. Now, sometimes what happens is people say, well, this line here of the mountain leads us up. But make sure you think about the continuation of the line. It does lead us up, but it also does lead us back down, right? So we keep kind of coming back to this figure right here, okay? Now, we have closed form mass, which is in the shape of the stele, right? And this is closed form actual mass, because this is a sculpture. It's a three-dimensional work of art. Closed form mass. But notice all I'm doing is saying closed form mass, right? And this idea that it conveys this sense of permanence and this sense of stability. Vertical placement. We've got certain different vertical planes that position these three figures up here at the top. We've got hierarchical scale. This figure clearly larger in size than these figures here. Unity, and we see both visual and conceptual unity. We see similar figures, similar size, similar shape, similar positioning of form. Conceptual unity, which we can kind of intimate with the fact that they're all kind of having these weapons, it looks like. They're all wearing the same outfit. What could that mean? Probably conveying the same idea. And then emphasis. And we know that we connect emphasis with focal point. What's the focal point, do we think, of this work? Clearly, it's this figure here. The majority of the implied lines lead us here. He's in one of the upper areas of the composition through placement of vertical placement. We see hierarchical scale. Also, look at how crowded this composition is, but there's all the space around him here. And that also helps to make him a point of focus as well. Now we bring it all together and we talk about the interpretation. What do you think all of this means? Okay, so clearly this is the focal point, right? This is this part that is responsible for communicating the message. We can look at the title. That's always a great clue. Victory Stele of Naram Sin. Probably this is then Naram Sin. Who is this guy, right? Clearly he's important and powerful. We know that because of the hierarchical scale. And even something like the fact that he's higher up vertically, that can also be a representation of power as well. So this guy is powerful. Now, who could he be? Who is powerful typically? Kings and gods. Okay, so kings and gods. So now let's think about that. we've got all these people down here, okay, and he's kind of like above them, so it looks like he rules over him. Still could be a king, still could be a god. Who do you think these people could be? They all look the same. They've got these like long stick sort of situations. They're all wearing the same outfit. What group of people would carry sticks? They'd wear the same outfit. They'd be led by somebody. I would say maybe the military. So it looks to me like maybe he's leading the military. He could be a king or he could be a military leader. Okay. Now, let's see here. 6 feet 6 inches. So this is a pretty tall piece of stone. This also conveys power because it'll be, as tall as a really tall man. But for most people, especially back way here a long time ago, this probably is kind of taller and looming over people. So that gives a sense of power and authority. And then this closed form mass, in combination with the fact that this is stone, so hard, durable material, gives a sense of power and permanence. And so this, what I would say is this is a person who's in charge. I would say probably a military leader or a king more so than a god. Because if you look, he too is holding weapons, he too has similar clothing. So he kind of is more in line with the military. Either a military leader or a king. And a lot of times in the ancient world, kings did actively lead the military. So I think a king is a safe interpretation. Clearly, this is a representation of power because of the hierarchical scale, the size of the artwork, the use of this really hard, durable material, all these people that are looking up. That can give us a clue as well. Is there anything else I am missing? I don't think so. If you can see this, though, you can see I feel like we've come up with a pretty good interpretation, but you can see that it's very vague. And this is where, moving forward, we could add in additional methodologies. Iconographical analysis, which has to do with symbols, we would come in and see if there's any symbolism that would be involved with this, which there is. And you will have to wait until the iconographical analysis lecture to find out what the symbolism is, but that could give us some more information. And then also good old-fashioned research would give us more information as well, which you will certainly be employing when you begin to write papers for this class. Let's try another one. This is a fabulous sculpture, Tellus, Mother Earth Goddess, which is found on the east facade of the Ara Pacis. This is a Roman work of art. Let's try to do the same thing that we did last time. Do you remember what the first step of formal analysis is? It is identify. And do you remember what this entails? That's right, only looking and no thinking. And that's also right, it entails pausing this video to go through and see what you can find with formal elements and design principles. So both of us, let's pause the video, take a close look, and let's come back. Okay, so hopefully you did that. Now, here's the thing for this one. Okay, the last one, the stele, was wonderful. There are so many different types of elements and design principles that we could find that really help to craft an interpretation. I'm actually not finding a ton here, which is good. This is exactly what I unintentionally hoped for, and that is to kind of, I think, prompt us to sort of solve how we can fill in some of the interpretive gaps that are here because of the lack of formal elements and design principles. Now here's what I found. Okay, let's see if this is what you found too. I found some expressive lines. Okay, some of these sort of like curving lines in here. And the idea is you have to be careful. It's not like, oh, here's one little line, expressive lines. You want to look at the whole composition, and if it kind of is something that you're seeing throughout, then it's something that I think you can include in your formal analysis. This to me is very expressive. This is expressive. All of this is expressive. Up here is expressive. Some more expressive line here. A lot of expressive lines. Now remember, we're just doing the identify parts. That's all I'm going to say. I see implied lines. I see hierarchical scale. I see unity. And I think you could say probably a visual and conceptual unity. And I see emphasis, focal point. All right, let's describe this a little bit further. Let's go in deeper. So with the expressive lines, this is what I'm kind of taking from this, okay? I'm taking this idea of movement, of this kind of idea of energy, of life, dynamic. If you're looking at this image, you can see it's full of plants and people and babies and animals. This idea of life, teeming life. Okay, but that's as far as I'm going to go. I'm not at the interpret part where I connect it all together. Implied lines, we've got eye lines, gestures, placement of figures with this person in the center. This woman here seems to me to be the focal point. This is probably, if we go back to the title, Tellus, Mother Earth Goddess. We can see there's hierarchical scale. She's larger in size. Okay, so that also probably is conveying that she's a goddess, more so than these figures right here, who we do not know who they are. Unity. So we've got a visual unity. Look at here, you see similar positioning of form. Even here, even though it's like kind of in the opposite, but I think that there's an opposite leg to kind of frame this woman here in the middle. We've got unity in the sort of emphasis on the breasts, similar position with the arms sort of leaning like this. Unity here, these sort of like cloths that extend over, repetition of plant forms, and of course there could be a conceptual unity. I think that we would have to kind of move towards the interpret part before we can better determine that. So, there's not a lot we can go on. So here's what I suggest, and I really, really would like you to please do this. This is going to be hard. You're probably going to think it's boring, but I would like you to please try this. I'd like you to please take out your phone and set the timer for 5 minutes. I know, 5 minutes is an eternity. And I would like you to spend 5 minutes just looking at this. I did the same thing myself. And what happens is when you spend 5 minutes, this actually can help you really notice things maybe you hadn't noticed before. And when you have to write your papers and things like this, I think it's a really good sort of pre-writing exercise to set your phone for 5 minutes for each image and to really take a look. So set your phone for 5 minutes, pause the video, see what you can notice, and come back. Now I did that. Okay, now here's what I noticed, okay. I looked at the composition and I looked at the space. And I saw that the space is really full. Now, I had mentioned this word before, this idea of teeming, right? Of abundance, all of this life, plant life, people life, animal life, that it's, abundant. And think, look how full the composition is, right? It's a very full composition. So this idea, I think, is that life is everywhere. So this might be an image talking about life, about fertility, abundance, growth. And this is in ancient Rome. And if we go back, this is the early empire period. This is the beginning of Rome. So maybe this is like talking about Rome growing as an empire, getting bigger and being more prosperous. If you look at the shape of the composition, it's a geometric shape. So what I was thinking is maybe this is a representation of order, that within this like teeming, growing, abundant, prospering empire, there is growth. There is, though, however, order. There's rationality. The early empire period is a time of a new political system, the first emperor. So maybe it's talking about how this new political system brings a rationality, and that rational political system is what's allowing for this growth, this flourishing, this life, this abundance. We've got stone, which we know can talk about permanence, stability. There's a stability now in Rome. And so again, we come up with this really kind of like looser idea about what we think this artwork's communicating. And it's an educated guess that we're making based off of our knowledge of formal elements and design principles. Now again, to be very clear, it would be advantageous if we could to bring in other methodologies, like again, looking at the iconography, the symbolism. There's other methodologies that we could use, but in this class we're just going to stick with these two. Now, if you are sitting here so curious, what is this about where we write? You do have my permission to look this up and see how close our interpretations were, or you can wait because we will be discussing further both of these artworks when we get to Mesopotamia and Rome, respectively.